Hello there, Board Game Maniacs, and thanks for joining me for another episode of Painting with Maniac, but it's not really painting yet. It's still in the terrain building process, or the building part. If you've been following along so far, the first video that in this little mini series is building a 3x3 portable gaming table. And what we did is we just built the frame of it all, and now this video is tying in with the one that is connected to it, which is the build video. In this one, we are actually going to be designing and making the terrain that is going to be inside of it. When I say terrain, though, I mean the gaming surface itself. And we're making it so that later on down the road, we can make like 1x1 modular tiles or 1.5 by 1.5 inch modular tiles, and we can sit them inside this gaming box just to add to it more. And the whole point of this is so you can play games like Marvel Crisis Protocol into it, as well as like skirmish games for Star Wars Legion, The Walking Dead All Out War, and so many other games like Test of Honor and everything else too as well. And what I mentioned before, because in the first video I had my little black book where I drew out the design. So this time we're doing a digital design of what I want to push in the gaming table itself for the 3x3 gaming table. And once I talk about all this information and everything else, then we'll go back into the workshop where I'll show you the materials I'm using, and we will build this exact thing. And depending on the length of that video, we may actually paint it too as well, or it may be a third video. I'm not sure yet until I start editing it. So let's just go in for a tighter shot of this where I mocked up the design, and let's talk about it, and we'll continue on from there. I was going to just do an edit cut over to the digital part, but you know what? I'm lazy today. It is a really warm day here in Ontario, Canada, and I do not do well in the heat. And we got the AC going on here, so it's keeping me somewhat cool. So I'm just going to keep it laziness like this. So sorry about that, but that's just the way it is. Anyhow, so you can see here the white that's disappearing and coming back on again. That is just so that it's easier to see on the camera. But actually the gaming surface of the board is from this corner to this corner and that corner to that corner. So it makes actually pretty much one square. But when you break it down, it's in essence going to be four squarish rectangles, I guess. Because you can see here this big red line that's going, this is a division line, so that when we fold up the case, we just close up the case, that this is where it splits at. So just so we're aware of that. And you can see these yellow lines here, these intersecting lines. That's just for me for measurements, just so I know and I don't forget. So for this first block, it is actually going to be roughly about 17 inches by 18 inches. This block, and that block is exactly the same, which is 17 by 18. And you can see here too as well that we have a road that is 6 inches wide by 36 inches long, which is 3 feet. And I painted up like it's going to be a crosswalk, and where the cars would have to stop. It's a 2-lane road, so one oncoming and one outgoing. Pretty simple. This is going to be all like asphalt, and you can see these 2 lighter gray areas here. That's going to be sidewalks that are gone down. You know, I've seen a lot of videos online that they made modular gaming boards that you would shift around and everything else, or even ones that aren't modular, and they do it so that you have an intersection in here. So it's a 4-way intersection where the roads are all coming, but I didn't want to do that. And the reason why I didn't want to do that is, again, what I explained previously, is that the whole point of this board, it's not going to be designed just for one game. It's going to be designed for a multitude of games. And by doing this and narrowing down the heights and everything of the base part of the gaming board, we can take modular gaming tiles and sit them on top of this, and it's not going to be too wonky or outrageous that it's going to be unbalanced, because it's going to still be kind of flat. You're going to have like a city scene, but then just say I made some modular tiles for like an apocalyptic theme. Well, then we could just place them in here for the 3x3. So just be aware of that. That's why I'm going with this kind of basic design. Very, very easy. I already got the materials laid out. We're going to talk about that. So just be aware again, this is 3 feet by 18 feet. 3 feet by 18 feet. And the red line is where it divides, where it shows for the fold. And this is just for reference for me for when I'm doing measuring. I may change the reference on the or the measurements on the fly slightly, but the design I'm sticking to, because you have to try to have design locked down and try to work off of that. So again, it's just going to be one road stretching from one side from 3 feet, going past the division and going up to the other side. It's going to be 3 feet here for the road by 6 inches. And that is it. So let's go to the shop now where we can start assembling this main part for the 3x3 portable table. I know I said we were going to be in the shop, but I might as well do it in better surroundings with better lighting conditions, because my shop, I have to set up a couple of lights. I'm not even going to bother. Like I said, it's a warm day. I'm being a little bit lazy, as they say, so we're just going to do it this way. In either case, let's go over some of the materials. So this is what we built. The first video you can see here. We're going to open it up in a bit. But what we're going to be doing now is we went to the dollar store and purchased some cork board rolls for $4 from, I don't work or sponsor, or Dollarama is not sponsoring, but I love Dollarama, I love Dollar Tree, I love any dollar store because you can get a lot of crafting stuff to build your stuff for next to nothing. So this is $4 for this roll, and it is 332 thick, 2 feet by 4 feet. And we all know that from this, the bottom of this to this is 18 inches. So we can take this and cover it right across the 3-foot section, because this is a 4-foot roll and there'll be no seams, which is great, what we want to use. So I bought 2 of these just in case, because it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So we're going to use that. We're going to use some PVA glue, hot glue gun, some sharp X-Acto knives, so be very careful using this if you need to. If you're not feeling comfortable, get some supervision for that. Some extra blades, because we definitely need some extra blades. We also got one of the more refined X-Acto knives. You can get these from, again, the dollar store. This is the Army Painter, though. I use this for scraping off the sprue lines and everything, so I'm repurposing it like usual. And you know, other couple of things like a pencil and a ruler. Probably going to use measuring tape. I don't have it laid out here, but if I need it, I'll get it. And also too, as well, maybe a couple of odds and ends that I'm going to be using, but for the most part is going to be here. Oh, also too, as well, I forgot about this. This is the foam board. So this foam board I got from the dollar store too as well. Very, very inexpensive and great for building terrain. So we're using that too as well. That is it for the materials. I'm gonna clear off the table, open this up. We'll be back and we'll talk about dimensions and what we have to cut and everything. One thing I didn't mention is for gluing the cork down, which we're going to be doing shortly before we start any of the build. I just want to talk about it. I didn't mention this in the tools. This is PL300 foam board. Now you can use many other things to glue down stuff to wood, to foam and everything else, but I've used this on several occasions in past builds and it never failed me. So today we are going to be gluing down with PL300, and I get this just at the local hardware store. You can buy them in a case or you can buy them loose, depending. It's not very expensive, so just be aware of that. So let's go back and start spraying this out for the cork. Now I know this is 3 feet and it's 18 inches, so we're going to deal with this. So we're going to put the PL down, cut the cork, what you're going to do off camera, and glue it down. So I got the PL Premium here, and I want to do it so it's very close. I'm keeping away from the seam there just for the time being. So I'm just going to apply this like so. I'm probably going to smoothen it out just a little bit. And again, you don't need to use PL Premium. You could use anything, like you could use PVA glue if you wanted to. Very easy, and it takes longer to set. That's all. Gold PL Premium too will take a little bit to set, but you can still work while it's setting. And that's kind of what I want to do. We just keep working. So I'm not going to bore you by keeping on applying this PL Premium. So once this is done, I'm going to throw the cork on and all back, and I'll show you what the one side looks like, and then we're going to do the other side and we'll continue on from there. I got the cork on this side done. It's stuck there with the PL Premium. I didn't have to put any extra pressure onto it or weight. And you can see this side, it's got a whole bunch of board games onto it for weight. And the reason why is when I was doing the PL Premium, once I get probably like a quarter of the way of the tube, there was a big blockage into it, and apparently the PL Premium, this never happened before, it was really weird, but it plugged up, like it was solidified, it was already set inside, half the tube was set. So what I ended up having to do is use PVA glue, and I put it down, and then I put the cork onto it, and then I set some weights onto it, which is some heavy board games, because this is Board Game Maniacs. And now I have to leave this sit. I'm going to leave this sit overnight. It is getting a little late here. So I'm going to leave this sit overnight, and then tomorrow, which will only be like a split second for everybody watching, but tomorrow I'm going to remove this and check it out to see if it's all glued down nice and tight, and we're going to continue on. Now, another thing too as well that I want to mention is the cork board, where it said that it was 4 feet long by 2 feet wide. That was totally wrong. The first batch that I opened up, I just rolled it out, and it was actually not even 3 feet long, but it does say in the package 4 feet. It had the seam. It ended up right here, like you can't really see it off camera, but I'm kind of pointing right here. So what did I have to do is piece together another piece of cork. Again, I wanted to avoid any seam lines, but unfortunately, that must have been just like a manufacturing defect, or they cut it off too short for making the cork. So because of that, I got the one seam on this side. The other side is fine. It's got the full length onto it. But this side here has a seam, so we're going to have to work that into the design some way, but that's further on through this video. So until then, we're just going to leave this sit overnight, let it dry, let it stick down really good, and then we're going to come back and continue on with the design work onto it. But it shouldn't be too difficult. Again, the main part is getting this cork down, which we managed to do tonight. So tomorrow we'll continue on. So I'll see you in, like, I'd say about 8 hours, but to you it's only going to be like a millisecond. Here we are the next day, but again, it's only been a millisecond for you. I cleared out off the game boards for putting down the weight, and it is all in the place where I want it to be right now. You can see there's like a cracker. You can't because it's off camera a bit, but there's a split here, and you know, a little crack here, but the seam that's along this is the one we have to work with. This here, we can just work it into cracks into the concrete, which will work pretty good. And same with that, I'm going to add more cracks as we go along with the design a bit. And if you lift it up, it's not stuck together, which is always a good thing. And that's it for this. This is going to be the base for our game board it's going to be like the asphalt, the road, and so forth. And if you can recall, for the design that I did for, we talked about on the computer, the road's kind of, it's not going this way, it's going to go this way here. And on top of that, there are going to be sidewalks going down. Now, what we could do is we could use more cork and make the road itself, but we already got the cork on. It's a good foundation for the base. So I'm thinking what we're going to do is just going to cut out for the sidewalks by using some foam core and laying the sidewalks down on each side. So that'll tell us where the road is, the sidewalks, and then just the city asphalt, or the city stonework, I should say. So it's going to be pretty simple. So I'm going to check my measurements on my design to see how big the asphalt or the sidewalks are going to be. But just before I do that, where we got the foam core, if we lay it this way, you can see it is short by a little bit, by maybe like 5 inches. So because of that, when we cut this and we're going to glue it down, now we're going to have to put designs into this to reflect sidewalks. So we're going to incorporate this, the seam, into the sidewalk, so therefore you're not going to tell where the seam is, and it's going to make it a lot easier. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to pause the camera for a second, find out what the measurements are, come back, we'll mark it out, and then we will proceed to cut it and glue it down. What we see here is I just got 2 Marvel Crisis Protocol miniatures to stand for the forum to measure how big a sidewalk is, because normally what a sidewalk is, the width of a sidewalk is 2 people can pretty much walk along it side by side. And then you don't want it to go too wide that it's almost as wide as a road. That's not going to work. So because of that, if we look at this, instead of placing them like exactly right here, because the reason why I picked Marvel Crisis Protocol, where I'm going to be using this as the game for Marvel Crisis Protocol, but other things too as well. These have some pretty good sized bases onto it. And I don't think like The Walking Dead and so forth don't have miniature bases that are this wide. So we're using the biggest one to base it off of. And again, this here, I think they're 40mm scale, if I'm not mistaken. So this is kind of like the biggest set for the miniatures that we're going to be doing. So because of that, we're just going to kind of mimic that if they were standing with feet apart like Iron Man is, but if Captain Marvel was doing it too as well, their feet would be touching roughly about there. So because of that, you look at the ruler here, and this is all in inches that I'm measuring. I'm thinking 2.5 inches is probably a good width for the sidewalk. So we are going to cut out some strips for 2.5 inches to put onto this. Take the ruler, we're just going to move these off because this is where the 0 is. And it is 2.5 inches. So we're going to mark 2.5 here. We're going to mark 2.5 on the other end, and in the middle we're going to draw a straight line, and then we're going to cut it. And we're just going to cut it in here itself, in this case itself. Let's zoom out a little bit here. Whoop, wrong way. Here we go. So we're going to cut it directly into that, but just so we don't score the cork, we're just going to use some scrap wood so that we can cut into it freely. So let's just measure this out here. So 2.5 inches by just straight 2.5 inches. Yep, and then up here too as well. And these measurements you don't have to go with and use for your sidewalk design. This is just what I'm doing because I want it to be like a multi-purpose gaming board. So we can use it for a lot of games. I'm just readjusting here just slightly because it looked like it was a little crooked. I think I'm just crooked. So just do that. And line up these lines here. Like so. And make these lines. All right, so that's one sidewalk like that, but if you butt it up against the edge of there and you do this, you're looking at roughly about another 6 inches that you have to cut for this. So we'll do that too as well. I'm not gonna start working out the designs for this yet. We could potentially do it before we even cut this, like put the marks into this of where the sidewalk is. Now, here in Canada, the sidewalks are like one slab of concrete. So because of that, we're just going to take our biggest base that we have, that I'm using anyhow, and we're going to measure him, or the base, to see how wide it is. So you're looking at, this base is like roughly 1.5 inches wide. So if we make all of the sidewalks here 1.5 inches, it should work like for the designs going across. And then after we do that, then we can carve them out, and before we start cutting. And what I mean by carving out is just adding detail to what the concrete's going to be or the sidewalk's going to be. So that's probably what we're going to do, is we're just going to start marking out like 1.5 inches, moving up, and then that way we're going to be ready. So that's 1.5 inches. So I'm not going to bore you by marking this all out. When we're done, and I'm going to cut it all the way back so that we're on the same page, or the same video clip, I should say. You can see a close shot here where I marked it all out, 1.5 inches, and then I just went over it with a pencil, and then I used the edge of my ruler, and I just kind of dragged it roughly, just to give it a little bit of an indent onto it, as you can see. Now, what some people like to do with their foam core is, before they put any design work or everything into it, they'll wet it down just to one side, and they'll peel off the paper and it'll expose the foam, and then they can just draw right onto the foam. And that's perfectly fine too. I just like doing it this way. Sometimes I do it the other way, sometimes I do it this way, but this is the time I'm doing it this way. Now, another thing you can do, I got the hiccups again. Just once I'd like to shoot a video and not have hiccups. All right, So one thing I do before I even cut this, and when I mark this, just to let you know, I didn't score right through it because I didn't want to cut through the other side of the foam core. So another thing you can do is just take your pencil again and you can draw some cracks. So like just crack in here, and then do the same process where you're just kind of cutting into the paper or the foam. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but I'm kind of poking it and just kind of giving my own little design work there. As you can see, again, you can just whatever way you want. You can do it as cracky as you want or not cracky as you want. It's totally up to you. So I'm going to go over all of the foam board right here, and I'm going to add some little indents like cracks here and there, and then when that's done we'll be back and we'll cut it for sure this time. All right, so I got some designs. Now I may add more when we glue it to the board. You know, it's all a work in progress, so just be aware of that. But if you add something, you can't take it away unless you just cut more foam. So I got my hardboard here that I'm going to use to cut underneath it, just so I don't kind of ruin the cork. So we're just going to put the straight edge here, line it up, hopefully with my big head not being in the way, and a fresh new blade in the X-Acto. It's very important because this can make some pretty bad rough cuts if you have a dull blade onto it. So we just make the cut. That's why I like using metal rulers, especially for this, because there's no way that the blade is going to be able to cut into this foam core or through the cut into the ruler. If it was plastic, chances are that you may cut into it. So that's why I like using metal rulers for that fact, because they're a lot more durable and they stand the test of time. So again, I'm just lining up the mark so we can make a nice straight cut. But because these sidewalks are damaged, you know, if you kind of screw up the cut a little bit, it's just going to add to the design, really. I think it is anyhow, but that's just me. So I'm just going to keep going with this cut, just like so, and cut away. There we go, snapped off. You can see it's very fragile, and the reason why it's very fragile is because we didn't cut, but we kind of made it that it's flexible, that if we want to, we can make a circle and start doing some pretty cool designs, but we're not going to do that. So the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to lay this in place onto it. I know it's 6 inches because I measured it off camera, just so that we can add that other piece. So what I'm going to do then, off camera, just to keep the video down, is I'm going to cut the 6-inch piece here. That's going to go so it fills up the board. And I'm going to cut the other one of this and the 6-inch piece too as well. And then when I'm done, we'll be back and we will glue it down to the foam cork, or the cork, the foam to the cork. That's what I was going to say, foam the cork. We'll be back. Now that I have the sidewalks cut out, I just laid them to make sure that it's going to fit properly and the seams are seamless, I should say. So you can see these are all rough, but the seam is here and it's a little bit too clean. So I'm just tracing it with the pencil just to bump it down a bit and get rid of some of this foam off of the edge here, like so. So yeah, I'm just going to be, like, actually I'll use the ruler, just kind of indent this a bit. And this one, indent it a bit. Can always indent it more, but we're going to have to put the road here first before we glue this down. And according to our measurements for the design that we made, the road is 6 inches wide. So we're going to find the middle of the board, and then we're going to do 3 inches on each side from the middle. And when that's done, we will have where we glue down our road. So let's measure. So measuring tape, I know it's 3 feet. So half of 3 feet is 1.5 feet. So if we put this here and go, okay, so there's 1 foot, and the half would be 6 more of that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so 18 inches. So we're gonna mark 18 inches from there. And now all we gotta do is, because it's 6 inches, so half of 6 is 3, so we put it on the mark. And we are going to mark out 3 inches on this side. And 3 inches on this side. And that is the width of our road. And just so that we're 100% sure that that is going to be the width of our road, if we measure from here to there, it's 15 inches. So if we just put another line down here, let's lock this in place. Put another line of 15 inches. Make sure that's still 15 inches. Just like so. And we can do it on this side too as well. So that's 15 inches. And 15 inches. So this should be 6 inches, and it is exactly 6 inches. So that's pretty easy. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trace just a line here, because we're going to put the cards onto it from the Marvel Crisis Protocol, because the cards that I do have, they seem to be the widest, because it is, again, 40mm scale. So we're just going to see how the cards look on this, because this is going to be kind of the width of the road. It's one lane going up and one lane going down. All right, so I just have 2 marks here because this is the width of the road. And you can see that you have a little bit of a space because you don't want it so the cars are like this for the road, because that's not realistic. You have to actually have it so, you know, there's a little bit of a distance between them where the lines are going to go. And that's pretty simple. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to continue with the lines drawn here. And then after the lines are drawn, the next thing I'm going to do is I'll be back and we will glue down the sidewalks. That's the name of it, right? Sidewalks, yeah. I'll be back. You can see here I got the lines all drawn out for the road. Double check them. They're actually nice and straight. Strange for a road to be nice and straight, I know. But in either case, the next thing we're going to do is I originally was going to put some PVA and sand on top of this cork for the road. But just to help move things along very quickly, I've seen this on a lot of videos online too as well when they were building terrain. And we're going to be using some sandpaper and cutting it to the width of the road. So I'll just bring this up here just to show you. So like so. And we're going to cut it to the width of the road. We're going to glue this down, and this is going to just help out with the difference of, number one, the look, because it's going to, when we dry brush this as opposed to this, it's going to look differently. And number two is that it's going to have a different texture to it too as well. So it's going to be pretty cool. And I think, I don't know exactly what video it was I watched online that they had the sandpaper for the roads. It may have been Mel the Terrain Tutor, and if so, thank you, Mel, for that little bit of tidbit of information. I'm just going to steal your idea and move on from there. But what we're going to do is we're going to cut all of the paper, the sandpaper, this way. Now, the only unfortunate thing is there are going to be some seam lines. And what I mean by that is so that when we put 2 pieces of the sandpaper together, like so, there are going to be some seam lines. So I'm not sure if that's going to work very well by doing that, or if I should just go with my original plan of the sand and PVA to give that the texture. And the reason why that I'm debating either using the sandpaper or that because of the seam lines. I don't want to have any seam lines in the road. I have to really think about this for a moment. Now, also too as well, that I want to point out is the video that I did watch, it was actually belt sandpaper. So you have a sand that has a belt, it's a belt driven, the sandpaper is one long sheet, but I don't have a belt sander, I don't have belt sandpaper. So then I could use this, but again, I'm worried about the seam right here. So I was like, this would be really cool if I did that. But I may just possibly go with my original idea of putting sand onto the cork. PVA and sand on the cork. I think that's what I might do, just because I don't want to have the seams going on, because this cannot reach the full length. And no matter how much I try to hide this and glue it down so it's butt nice and close together, you're still going to have that seam, that noticeable seam. And with the noticeable seam, it's going to take away from the realism of playing the game somewhat, and I don't want that. I want to be immersed into whatever game we're playing, so I may just go with the sand. Oh, I'm so indecisive on this. I don't know. I have to really think about this. Usually my first thought is the one that I go with because it seems the most logical, but I'll be back. Well, I consider all the possibilities, and I'm going to kind of treat the painting part of this as like when I'm doing prosthetics. And what that means is if there's noticeable seam, you paint in a different direction, and because of that, it may hide up the seam. If not, we can sprinkle some sand onto a PVA glue afterwards, because I kind of like this feeling for the road. So, and it will be a different variation of texture. So we may try this. If it don't work, then so be it. I'll figure out a way to try to hide the seam a little better. So that's what we're going to do. So all I'm going to do off camera is I'm going to measure 6 inches over, draw the straight line on them all, and cut them, make them fit, and then we'll be back to glue this down. It's all cut, it's all in place, it's all lined up. This is what I'm doing. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to apply PVA glue to it, hold it down, put some weights onto it, like some more game boards, to hold it in place and leave it sit. And when this is all set, I'll be back, and I might do the sidewalks too as well, I don't know, but when we come back, the sidewalks may be glued down too as well. So be aware of that. Now, I was going to just apply this and just come back, but the thing is I put the PVA glue down, so I just want to show how we do the application of PVA glue. It's not hard at all, because I'm just lining it up to where this goes, making sure that it is straight and flush. This is pushed down really good all the way around, just like so. And obviously when you weigh this down, you're going to have to leave it sit for a little bit, like an hour or more, just to make sure that it is secure. If you can leave it longer, like a full 24 hours, that'd be great. But if you can't, then that's, it's not a big deal. You can do both, don't really matter. I originally was going to use super glue, but lots of super glue. So I'm just brushing away the seam from the seam here, because I don't want the PVA to get on the seam if I can. Now, one thing you got to think about too as well, because of this cork, and it is still glued down nice and secure, it could lift up and create some kind of bubbling effect. So you just want to be aware of that specifically. So I'm just going to keep lining this up. Try to push it down so that there's no seam visible at all. And you just keep continuing on. So just like that. So we'll be back after all this is all dry, and we'll be on to the next step. I decided to leave it sit overnight because I just wanted to make sure it was nice and secure, and it is super down tight. I put more board game boxes on top of it to weight all this down. So we're ready to start kind of just spicing up the concrete by cutting some designs. And you can see there's some PVA glue right here that is not dry. I just applied that down before I turned the camera on, because from where this was too short, that I just added some PVA glue to try to hide that seam a bit, see if that would work. And it did turn out pretty good, that the seams are very minimal that you can see on the road, so that's good. And just to make sure, it does flip up. Inception. Ooh. So yeah, it does flip up, such as that. So the next step we're going to do to this before we go and do any painting is we're going to start cutting some designs into the cork to give it a little bit of cracking of the asphalt. You can see there's some cracking here already. That's just from a split that happened when I was putting it down, but it's very natural, it's organic, and I'm leaving it. So we're going to start designing by drawing out some cracks into this asphalt and then cutting it out with the X-Acto blade, and then it will be ready for painting after the PVA part is dry. There's already, like I said, the natural crack that happened when I was gluing this down. So we're just going to try to incorporate this. We're not going to do a lot because less is more in a lot of cases. So I'm just going to draw from here with the pencil, just a couple of lines here. Like that's one huge crack into the concrete or the asphalt. So again, we just draw a line like this. And then we're going to take our X-Acto knife, just kind of cut into it like so, and just kind of drag it along in spots just to kind of cut into it, but you don't want to cut completely through. You can if you want. You may have to re-glue some stuff down so you find that the glue is lifting a bit, but you can see there. Hopefully you can see on camera with that there. So that's what we're going to do. I'm just going to draw some more cracks all over the board, and when I'm done with that, we'll be back. Now that all the cracks are on, again, I did less is more, which means I put a little less, which means it's more than enough, all over the table. Now we're going to add a little bit more detail, and this is from Army Painters, I think. It's pretty much cork that is very fine, and we're just going to go in, we're going to add it to little parts here and there, such as like the edge of the road, which we're going to do now. So let's go in closer shot for that. To add a little bit of debris from, you know, cracks or broken parts of the sidewalk and everything else, you could use just the cork that you scraped up when you were doing like the design work, the cracks and everything into the cork part. You can break up some cork, but I had this stuff kicking around that's very fine, so I figured why not just use this. So all we do is let's just apply some right here. Gonna take some PVA and just stipple it on like so, even on top of the sidewalk a little bit, just like that. Then we're going to take a little bit of our cork stuff, our fine cork, and just drizzle it over it. So you can see there, again, it's very fine. And we're going to continue on that, just to dress up a little bit here and there. And then we are going to pretty much say this part of the video is done. But I'm going to put all that down, and I'll be back when it's all done to show you what it looks like. There you have it, Board Game Maniacs. I just added just little bits of dirt here, you know, and here too as well, down there. And I just add a little bit to the cracks, just very small amounts, a little heavier in others. And then all I'm doing is I'm going to take my watered down PVA and put it over top of this and then leave it dry. I also added some PVA onto the seams just to be on the safe side, to try and minimize the seams once this is painted, because I know when it's painted you may be able to see a little bit more, but we're going to paint it hopefully when we do dry brushing on top of the sandpaper. Because of all these little specks, it's going to fool the eye so that you can't see the seams. If not, we will seal it another way, which is not a big deal. And you can see, because this is the separation, like I said, and I put a little bit of like grime onto this because this kind of ran out of the one roll, and there's the crack too. So that's pretty much it. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop this video right here, let this all dry, and in the next installment of this, we're going to paint this up, and that will be the final steps. So we're going to just paint up the road, the sidewalks, and the asphalt to make it just a generic scene for a lot of the games that we play at Board Game Maniacs that is on a 3x3 surface. I hope you're enjoying these build videos so far. I really like building terrain. I'm probably going to build a lot more in the future for all different various games too as well. So tune in for that, and I'll see you in the next video where we complete this project. And until then, be a maniac. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to keep up to date with Board Game Maniacs, click on the like and subscribe button to be notified when more videos come available. If you want to become an official sponsor of Board Game Maniacs, go to patreon.com/BoardGameManiacs. Or you can go to streamlabs.com/BoardGameManiacs1. That's right, and you can donate to help keep the lights on, keep food in our bellies, and play more games. We'll purchase more games, more equipment to make Board Game Maniacs evolve and get bigger and larger. Because of you, the viewers, I thank you from the bottom of my toes to the top of my head for all of your support. And until next time, Board Game Maniacs, be a maniac.